Hey everyone, welcome to Art Direction for Character Designers. This is Lecture 1. And in Lecture 1, we are really going to be starting off with some basic concepts for art direction, things to keep in mind. And as we proceed through this class, we're going to try and cover a lot of the major things overall that character designers should really be aware of when thinking about being art directed on several different types of projects. So in this first project, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and pull up our style reference, and you'll see that we'll do this in most of our assignments. There will be style reference provided, which we'll want to definitely stick closely to. And usually that's one of the biggest challenges when it comes to being art directed, is not just necessarily doing your own style or doing what you feel comfortable with. It's oftentimes adapting to a certain style that has already been chosen for the project, whether it be by the art director, whether it be by the director themselves, or oftentimes if the studio has a certain idea of something that they want, it's up to us to fall in line and do exactly what they were hoping for. So we're going to start with some of the basic principles of what we need to be covering here in this style. And a lot of what we're going to be focusing on are line, shape, and color with this style. Now, you'll see there's some style reference I've pulled up there, which I'll get to later. Right now, this though, if you look over here at these cubes that I have and the two lines, this is really what we're going to be focusing on. We're going to be focusing on the line aspect, which falls in line with a lot of the things that are in this style. We're also going to be focusing on the shape and color aspect, which is really the opposite angle of this design, but has to work closely with the line. And as we start breaking down the style reference, you'll really see how all of this relates to itself. If you look at that page of style reference, you'll see all different forms of combination of line, color, and shape. And that's really where we're going to be focusing our efforts this week. Here you can see a shape of color with line inside of it, defining some detail. Here you can see some line detail with some color accents on the edge and shape accents. Here you can see variations of line, thicker shapes of color to define the face. And as I'm calling out all of these things, you can see that different things are interpreted differently. Here, the faces, you have orange color with line detail on top. And in the outfits, you have black color with red line detail on the interior. So oftentimes, we'll take the same idea and we'll flip the values or flip the colors. And changing that application can help suggest differences in the design, whether it be skin tone to clothing tone, or let's see, t-shirt versus pants, so on and so forth. So as you'll see, I gathered a lot of different types of things. Now, it's not necessarily to say that we have to just do a Jim Flora-ish design. You'll see that some of this stuff is Jim Flora, some of this stuff is Provençon, some of this stuff is other just random illustration that falls in the same category of designing in this method. But you'll see that everything relates to this concept, just in slightly different ways. And that's really what we want to focus on is, like I said, we don't want to just say, okay, only do a Jim Flora design. It's really more about the shape, color, and line application versus the specific artist's style. And by looking at this, you can see there's a lot of different ways. Like that style right there is totally different than the Jim Flora stuff, but the color application is the same. This Provençon illustration of this sort of Quaker guy, has a bit more of a retro-y children's book feel, whereas Jim Flora is, while still retro, has a bit more of a sort of graphic and not necessarily a print, but it has a music vibe to it, which he comes from doing a lot of music artwork. So anyways, I think you can start to gather that there's a lot of different ways that you can handle this project. The main thing we want to focus on is these rules of color, shape, and line. Now I'm going to go ahead and illustrate very quickly. I'm going to use this Quaker character as an example for different things to look out for when you are basically working on this illustration. I'm going to do a demo later, but this is just sort of covering the rules. So you can see I went ahead and illustrated a hat and just decided to use a basic black shape for that hat. And that really is one great place to start, is try and find areas where you can put color or shape, and then try and find ways to balance that with the line work. And you can see when you look at him, his hat is a color shape, his coat is a color shape, the bowl is a color shape, but combined with that, his hair is a cartoony line shape that's different than a straight line. It's a curly line that kind of suggests a different texture. And those are the ways that we want to sort of balance different things. If you look at his hair versus the steam lines coming off the food versus the lines for the what look like mashed potatoes, you can see there's 3 different ways of using line work, one of them which has a different color, and that helps break up the different choices that you're making, different elements in the illustration. And these are areas that are going to be up to you to kind of figure out different things that you want to do. Now here you can see, as I illustrated the line for his face, it has a different sort of application than the hair, and it feels totally different. You don't feel like, oh, is that a long piece of hair sort of making out the shape of the face? No, because you're going, more straight line with it as far as the face goes, and very curly with the hair, you're able to suggest that difference. Now here I'm going to draw the bandana, and I'm using a color shape, and because the color shape is different in that it has a color versus the black of the hat, which is just black, you don't feel, again, like it's another piece of the hat down there. You feel like it's a different element of this design. And these, like I said, these are really the things that you want to focus on. You want to make sure that you are creating your design and using this style to really add clarity and look to this overall style. You can see I mixed up the handkerchief or bandana with polka dots. Again, trying to find different patterns, different textures, different ways of applying these sort of theories of color, shape, and line to define different areas, to make it different. Here I drew a strip across the hat to help give just a little bit more information, a little bit more volume to the hat. Even though it's still graphic, you get a sense that there's some more detail up there to gravitate towards. I'm adding a little feather into the hat, and you can see by choosing, again, it's a solid shape, but it's colored, the shape, and then adding a little bit of line work on top. It still separates everything the way we're talking about between color, line, and shape. However, it's using all of those elements together to help define more of the character, showcase more details. And really what this style forces you to do is it forces you to make specific choices about how you want to use this application of style. You can't just sort of do a big line drawing and then add a little color. Odds are that's going to not embellish the style as well as you possibly could. It's not going to take advantage of what you can use here. But, I mean, certainly it's up to you however you want to approach it. I would just suggest, going about it the way I'm showcasing it here, taking advantage of what you can do between different shapes and colors and silhouettes. If you look at that Irish whiskey bottle over to the left, you can see there's color, shape, and line all in one, and it's really sort of illustrated that bottle in a really cool way. So we're just going to go over a couple more of the basic rules to be thinking about. Again, all of these are going to be in the lecture notes, which are going to be accompanied with this lecture. So make sure that you go over all of that. That's where you're going to find the animations or the assignment style reference, so on and so forth. So look for that. So basic rules, things that we want to focus on. We already covered the basic things of line, shape, and color. But as far as our application goes, we want to make sure that our shapes have a certain treatment versus the line. Now, when you're using a shape, you want to make sure that your shape basically is that silhouette. You're not drawing lines around it. You can use line work on top of it, but you want to make sure that you basically only use line work in the interior, in the middle, inside the shape, like I did the polka dots. The reason for that is because the shape itself doesn't need any line work. The shape should define what that item is, or the combination of the shape and the interior line work should define what that is. Now, is it possible to have exterior line work by itself? Sure, that's what we did with the face. But as you can see with the bandana up on the boy, which again I have sort of illustrated it down here, you can use line work all inside of that shape, like I did, whether it's defining the knot or defining a pattern to help showcase that that's definitely a bandana. But you do not want to use line work on the outside of it. You want to make sure that you you don't do that, because that instantly breaks the style. Now, if you happen to find an example of that, just go ahead and discard that. I'm sure there are examples in this style in other places where they've done that, but generally speaking, we want to avoid that. We want to make sure that our shape in itself is clear enough in its silhouette that we can understand what it is, whether it be by itself or with additional line work on top. So keep that in mind. No line work on the outside of that shape. And I think what you'll notice is as you start to get more comfortable with this style, certain things like that, like say illustrating line work around a shape, will start to draw a red flag for you as a designer. And ultimately, that's what you want to think about within these assignments. The more comfortable that you get with them, and think about them in sort of a grand scheme of things. If you were working in this style, say for 2 months or even 3 weeks for a certain freelance project or an illustration gig, once you start to get comfortable with the rules, then you're really going to understand them better. In the sense that you're going to be able to just illustrate very cleanly without having to worry so much about the different rules. And here you can see I'm basically taking a black shape, I'm using line work and color in different ways and in the same way, in that the colors are different but the line work is the same. And this is what I was talking about, interior lines. Here you wouldn't want any of those white lines or colored lines around the edges. You want to only use them on the interior. And this really is the more that you get comfortable with these rules, the more you're going to see things and shapes and characters differently, as far as ways that you can treat that detail, ways that you can treat the line work versus the shape. But you really want to make sure that that line work and the detail all falls within those shapes, nothing on the edges. Now we're going to come back to this hat again that I illustrated, and I'm just going to use this sort of boy character to describe a lot of things. So you'll see that we'll go back to him a couple of times. But I think one thing that you can see here is the relationship between just the simple line and shape, the black lines difference between the line and the shape of the hat is really pretty clear. And that's one thing iconically that we want to capitalize on this style with. We want to make sure that we take advantage of clarity. Now I know we've talked about that in other classes, but this is really specific here. We want to make sure that Our shapes and our line work are simple, precise, and very, very clear. Now you can see that I've used red line work along with the black line work to suggest other details within this character. And that's another way that you can play with the shape, the line, and the color. Is you can have line and line, but have them both each have their own color, whether it be black, whether it be white, or a color of your choice. Here I'm using red. And by doing so, you're separating something totally different. You're indicating this is hair versus this is skin. And that's something that's really exciting to be able to take advantage of. Using white over black or white over color allows you to do the same thing, but just over the top of a shape. So it's almost like a negative space, which could be perceived as like a hole in the hat, or if you're looking at it stylistically, it actually showcases a little bit of definition or volume within that hat. And that's a really fun way of playing with all of these different elements of style. Now, the one thing you want to make sure you do, and see how I'm erasing this black line? I'm doing so to clear up that, that tangent of the black line running underneath the colored line. And the reason for that is that we want to suggest that even though this hair is just a couple of lines to make up that volume of hair, we want to suggest that it has volume and depth, that it's not just a see-through line on top of a head. So we want to basically erase that black line so it makes the hair feel like it has volume. So one of our main rules as well is 3 colors only. And you'll see in a couple of the gym floor examples, he uses gray along with black, white, and a color. And we don't want to do that, so make sure that you don't do that. All of the other references, for the most part, don't have gray in them. If they do, just sort of ignore that a little bit. I wanted to include those so you could see what it looked like if you started to expand away, that it's pretty obvious if you use a different or an extra color. But we want to use a color of any of your choice, black, and then white. And that really helps define this style. And as we've talked about, there are many different ways of using black. Let's use red as our color. Black, red, and white. You can do it in different things. Like here you can see the gray. This is something we don't want to do. But amongst all of these other styles, you can see whether it be blue, whether it be purple, whether it be orange. You can really see that you can choose any color you want. I would suggest this. Try and use a color that helps sell a little bit of the style of your character. If you want. If you're looking for an extra source of inspiration, you could go that way. You don't necessarily have to. You can see, like, with the guy driving the car right here, there's no real need for it to be red. But if you wanted to, say, sell a character that was sort of gloomy and depressed and bummed out, you could go with a blue or something like that. If you wanted somebody super cheery and happy, you could go with a yellow. It really doesn't matter. You can use that to your advantage, or you can just pick a color that you feel looks cool. The main sense of this style is just keeping that limited palette and really playing to your strengths of using color, line, and shape. Remember, don't use that gray. It looks cool, but you'll find actually when we get into the demo that one extra color would really make things a whole lot easier, give you more options and variety, but it does change the style. And there are certain things about working in such a limited style that really forces you to think differently and forces you to make more precise decisions. And that's something that we really, really want to take advantage of. So let's go ahead and get into the demo. What I'm going to do is, as we've done in past videos, I'm going to go through and basically take you through my process of how I would approach this assignment myself. It's the easiest way that we can kind of go about it, and I can at least walk you through some of the problems that you might face as I go through the problems that I'm facing with this. So I'm going to basically, for my character, I'm going to be designing a jolly chimney sweep. Now, as you can see, I've gathered character reference over here. I'll walk you through a little bit of it, but basically, I just went ahead and Googled chimney sweep, went online, different websites, stuff like that, tried to find some cool reference. I want to do something that's a little old-timey, not necessarily current day chimney sweep, but I'm looking for different things. In different cases, the chimney sweep looks different, the hats look different. Obviously this one that I just drew over is a costume versus this guy over here on the right who's a legitimate chimney sweep. So you want to make sure that you gather as much reference as you can to help make more informed decisions about props, attire, general wear and tear on the character, what's to be sort of expected, maybe ways that they stand or things that they're holding. The more that you can do that, even facial hair, here you can see these guys all have mustaches, which is pretty cool. The more that you can gather all of this reference, the better informed your design will be and more accurate. So whatever it is that you choose to draw and design as a character, make sure that they have some form of occupation or at least something that's readable. I mean, you could do a hobo or a drunk if you wanted to. Just make sure that it feels like that in their attire. You could do a businessman. If you're going to do a businessman, think about time period or type of business they might be in. If you're going to do, let's say you were going to do an actress, think about, again, time period, type of actress, maybe the setting that she would be in, or so on and so forth. So that's really what I do, is I grab my reference, I get all of that in order, I get some of my style reference up that I kind of like, and just basically start thinking about all the ways that it's going to have to look. But again, you have to start off simple, small, and early with this design. You can't do it all at once. Really have to trust the process. And that's what we'll go through, is we'll basically talk about the process. Now, one thing that I really like about this chimney sweep idea, and one thing that sort of drew me to it, was the prop of the chimney sweep in contrast with the character, slash the human who's with it. Now, if I'm thinking about a human in normal proportions, there's a little bit of contrast there, but not as much as I want. What I really want to do is I want to try and push my basic contrast choice. I could either do something very thin and similar, almost like a chimney sweep brush and a character that's in the same same sort of design sense, almost like a Jack Skellington chimney sweep, which could be really cool. Or I could go with something way more contrasty, something maybe short and stout that really contrasts with that chimney sweep prop. And for me, this right here plays into that whole idea that we've talked about in past classes, big versus small, heavy versus thin. It's the more that we can push our design into a more stylized area, more that we can use contrast within our design, the more interesting our design will be. Doesn't mean that it's necessarily appropriate for every character or every design or style, but in this case I really want to push it because I feel like I have an opportunity here where it can be influential to the design. It won't be distracting. If anything, it will just help enhance the design and make it more interesting. So I'm going to play with that idea, big versus small, here in this way, and that's really sort of where I'm going to start. And I would suggest you all think about starting in this similar way. Look at your design. Look at the Look at the character that you're interested in based off of your reference. Are there opportunities off the bat to really think about contrast or some really sort of global, big picture shapes, iconic shapes and details that might really suggest who this character is? And you can see here, I'm illustrating in a very simple and rough way. These are just some concepts, things I want to play with. Possibly the top hat, the scarf around the neck, the little box or case of tools, the short, stout body with the sort of working boots below. Obviously, I don't want to just draw a square with details, but maybe I'll think about facial hair like a mustache. But if I can think about my character in a very simple way, as you can see, this is taking me like 30 seconds to draw. And all it's doing is it's helping me just start to think about some of my goals with this design in ways that I want to plus it. Now, I'm starting to showcase a little bit of line versus shape versus color, but this is still a little too early on to think about it. Mostly I'm just trying to think about props, whether it be rope around the chimney sweep, whether it be a vest with a pattern that's different than maybe the scarf, those types of things. But ultimately, I'm just trying to think big picture, think small, starting to conceptualize it. And now I'm going to take that idea, which is now sort of in the back of my head, into my preliminary sketch phase. Now, I don't want to just use a typical square or a box. Not that that would be bad, but I want to go ahead and try and plus it a little bit. So I'm going to use a stout shape, but I'm going to use more of like a pear shape to build my design off of here. And the big reason for that is, like I said, I want to use a simple shape, but I don't want to use a simple shape that is necessarily as simple as a square, a rectangle, a triangle, a circle. Totally fine if you want to use that, but for me, I want to sort of build off of that idea. I want something stout, but I want a little bit of variety in there. And so the way that I'm sort of sketching out this body is I'm getting that variety in the lower half, getting it wider, I'm getting it narrower up towards the head and carrying that on up into the hat. And basically just sort of illustrating the arms out to the side. And this is going to be my rough pass. This isn't going to be anything pretty, anything I'd necessarily put in my portfolio unless I'm going to go ahead and showcase it as a progression from rough to final. But the main thing again here is I'm basically doing what I just did with the simple sketch, and I'm just elaborating a little bit more. Starting to pick and choose some things. Do I want these arms to be lower set on the body on a sort of wider part of the body? And as I sketch these things out, I'm starting to think about, okay, the chimney sweep over his shoulder. Starting to think about maybe the hand on the side rather than the other hand up high. How big do I want the feet in proportion to the body? I'm just sort of carving all this out. If you could imagine this being a sculpture, I'm just sort of molding the clay into a rough basic shape. My end design is going to be different than this, but it's going to be channeling kind of what I'm conceptualizing here in a rough way. And I'll take you through that. And this is really how I work. I try and rough it out simple, very small, to give me a sort of a guideline to kind of keep in mind, a visualization, so to speak, and then just building off of that. And right now I'm kind of just trying different things, a bigger nose, smaller eyes, ears set out to the side, cartoony in their silhouette rather than realistic and sort of being closer to the head. All of these things just sort of come through with me roughing this out and just sort of thinking about it. Trying maybe a bandana rather than a scarf around his neck. In different references there have either been bandanas or scarves, and so I'm just sort of trying that, see how it goes. Maybe trying to find a waistline. But overall, you can see I'm just sort of